Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature from March of the Machine's main set in no particular order, plus the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, like today, and if there's interest, maybe I'll even do the non-face legends from the Mom Commander product. So if you have a request for a March of the Machine Commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build it, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Katilda and Lier, the witch leader of the Dawnheart Coven, and the high priest of a cult that worships the old god of storm and sea, both from Innistrad. Katilda was at the center of the events of Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, trying to reset Innistrad's day-night cycle, and in the process, she performed a ritual, got her soul trapped in the Moonsilver Key, got abducted by Olivia Voldaren, got accidentally freed by Soren Markov, manifested as a spirit, unbound the Angel Sigarda, helped the Gatewatch retrieve the key, and then had her spirit reinstalled in her body. Whew. Lier, on the other hand, is a wizard. There's not much lore for this pairing, since this is one of the 3 team-up cards available only in March of the Machine pre-release kits, but that's okay. Few players remember the events of Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow all that clearly, so if you want to pass off your Katilda/Lier fanfic as canon, go for it. Anyway, before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why they're so cool and why I was inspired to build a deck for them. So whatever they ask of me, I put 30 cards toward doing that. That's our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go toward supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, just to reset the board if we need to, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always hold to my floor of 38 lands, so I always hit my land drops, and I can cast my spells and, play the game. So let's talk about our team-up commander. Katilda and Lier is a 3/3 legendary human, just a human, for Bant mana, a green, a white, and a blue. It says, whenever we cast a human spell, target instant or sorcery card in our graveyard gains flashback until end of turn, and the flashback cost is equal to its mana cost, which means we can cast it with normal timing restrictions for its flashback cost, its regular mana cost, and then we exile it once we've done that. Notably, it says cast a human spell, not a human creature spell. That'll come up soon. So, we're here to play humans. Human Typal is supported in so many color combinations, and it's always fun. But our commander also wants us to sling spells, and rewards us for playing our creatures with the ability to cast those spells a second time. So what do we emphasize? The witches or their craft? Luckily, we're a deck that knows how to eat its vegetables, so we can let the humans be the star of the show. We're running 33 human spells, and almost as many humans themselves, again, more on that in a minute, as well as 25 instants and sorceries. The majority of those are cheap, either mana value 3 or less, since we want to be able to cast a human spell and still have enough mana to either cast a non-permanent spell or to flash one back. The alternative is casting 2 humans in a turn, which lets us target 2 different spells in our graveyard with our commander's ability, and keeps our opponents guessing as to which we're going to cast. Get it? Which we're going to cast? Okay, anyway. The challenge with this deck, is timing. Creatures are cast at sorcery speed, and so are, well, sorceries. Flashback doesn't let us cast our spells faster than their normal timing allows, so while we can do the trick of casting a human spell, having our commander's ability target an instant in our graveyard, then flashing back that instant before our human spell resolves, it's not generally worth it. Better to have access to a spell for the rest of the turn and cast it when it's most advantageous, which, I have to assume, is the reason they templated Katilda and Lier this way. That said, the addition of Spellslinger strategies to our creature Typal deck is really interesting. In fact, the deck kind of feels like 2 in 1. We have our Anthem creatures and our token generators, but we also have spells which make those tokens and creatures that trigger from those spells. Magecraft-style effects in a creature deck feel unexpected, but they play great, and seeing the Spellslinger snowball happen when we appear to be a boots-on-the-ground combat deck is a blast. But the theme of dualism doesn't end there. Since we're likely to cast multiple spells each turn, we have creatures that reward us for double spelling. Since our commander triggers when we cast human spells, we have ways to bounce and rebuy those humans, or even just flicker them to trigger Enter's effects a second time and protect our board in the process. Since our commander cares about human spells, not just creatures, we have Changeling cards, the best example of being more than just one thing and a fine addition to any Typal strategy. And while we do win the game by making our board bigger and turning our friends sideways, we do it with the kind of sorceress support that's appropriate of an army led by a wizard and a warlock, who in my fic are BFFs with friendship bracelets, matching tees, the whole nine. This dynamic duo gives us a two-pronged approach that is nevertheless single-minded in its pursuit of victory. We populate the battlefield and the stack alike, and one feeds the other, which feeds the first until our playmat is full and our opponents are fed up. Every new ally comes with the promise of a second spell, a 1-2 punch that eventually breaks our opponent's defenses and shatters their life totals. In the end, we are too numerous, too synergistic, too fast, too furious, too relentless, two peas in a pod. Look how cute they are. You'll enjoy this deck if you like a solid game plan of sturdy creatures backed by supportive spells, or if you like the strength that only comes when you combine pluralism of thought with unity of focus. So as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will see a considering section, full of a bunch of other cards that I considered putting in, but ultimately didn't because either it didn't fit my budget, it didn't go with the strategies I was going for, or some other reason. But if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you have a different take you want to go with for this deck, the considering section is a great place to get started and get some inspiration if you build your own Katilda and Lier deck. So we're going to start with the core of the deck. It's our humans. We've got a lot of these cards, so let's go through them. Avacyn's Pilgrim starts us off. This is 1 green mana for a 1/1 human monk that taps to add white. It's a Llanowar Elves that is a human and makes white mana instead. Yeah, pretty sweet. Cathar Commando is next from Midnight Hunt. This is 1 and a white for a 3/1 human soldier that we can flash in, or we can, we can pay a generic and sacrifice it to destroy an artifact or enchantment. What's great about Cathar Commando is it's one of the cards that is a human spell that has flash, which means we can cast this on our opponent's turns, which will trigger our commander and give us the ability to flash back one of our spells that's in the graveyard for its mana cost. We can only do that with instants in our graveyard, but that's still a nice benefit that we wouldn't have otherwise had if we didn't have a flash creature to trigger it. Coppercoat Vanguard from March of the Machine Aftermath is next. 1 and a white for a 2/2 human soldier that gives all of our humans +1/+0 and ward 1. That's sweet. Just everything that's a human, it gets a little bit more power and a little bit more protection. That sounds great. Katilda, Dawnheart Prime, this is Katilda's first appearance in Midnight Hunt, is a green and a white for a 1/1 human warlock. She's legendary. She has protection from werewolves, may not be relevant in most tables, but you never know, and gives all of our human creatures the ability to tap for mana of any color in their colors. So for example, Wrath Weatherlight Stalwart can tap for white or for blue, but Katilda can tap for green or white, and Coppercoat Vanguard can only tap for white, that sort of thing. In addition, we can pay for a green and a white and tap Katilda to put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. Now it is important to note that that is just this card that has that ability. Even though this is Katilda, we can't use another Katilda as though it has that ability. But in any case, if we've got a bunch of mana to dump, which we usually don't in this deck, but if we happen to, it's a nice trick to do on an opponent's turn. Maybe we hold up mana to make it look like our Spellslinger deck has some responses, and then before our turn, we dump 6 mana into this Katilda and put a counter on all of our creatures. Next, we have Lavinia Azorius Renegade. I put this in here for, it's not meant to be stacksy exactly, but it kind of is. For a white and a blue, we get a 2/2 legendary human soldier that says each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with mana value greater than the number of lands that player controls. That is to say, our opponents can't use their artifacts or their rituals to ramp spells out, and they can't cast spells without paying their mana cost unless those spells have a mana value not greater than the number of lands they control. So this stops our opponents from casting some of their spells and at least slows them down a bit. That's annoying, so it also makes Lavinia a little bit of a removal magnet. So that means they're going to be using their removal spells on Lavinia rather than something we might care about more like Katilda and Lier. In addition, whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. So this is a free counterspell effect anytime any opponent cheats something out. Yeah, that sounds good. Can you see someone playing an Apex Devastator and getting to Cascade 4 times and having all of those spells countered? That seems pretty good to me. Next is Quandrix's Apprentice. A green and a blue for a 2/2 human wizard with Magecraft. Whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, we look at the top 3 of our library. We can reveal a land from among them, put it in our hand, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Or in any order, rather. So Quandrix's Apprentice lets us dig for lands. So we're likely to be able to make our land drops. It's not ramp, but it is drawing us, essentially, a land most of our turns, every time we cast or copy an instant or sorcery. And that includes when we flash them back. So pretty nice. Next we have Wrath Weatherlight Stalwart from Dominaria United. I really like this card. A white and a blue for a 1/3 legendary human wizard that says whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we can tap 2 untapped creatures we control to draw a card. So we can do that with our tokens, we can do that with our, obviously, our non-tokens, we can do that with our commander if we're not planning to attack with our commander that turn. That seems great. And it works, again, on opponents' turns when we cast instants, and anytime we flash back an instant or sorcery, we can turn it into card draw. Plus, we can pay 3 and double white to give all of our creatures +1/+1 and vigilance until end of turn. So it costs a little bit less. It costs 1 green, I guess, less than what Katilda's asking of us. Essentially, yeah, it's 5 mana versus 6. And doesn't put counters on our creatures, but does give them vigilance, so that's pretty good. It also doesn't require us to tap. So if we get to a point where we have 10 mana lying around, we can give all of our creatures +2/+2 until end of turn with Wrath. Next, from Tarkir Dragonstorm, we have Tygum Master Opportunist. 1 and a blue for a 2/2 legendary human monk with Flurry. Flurry's a cool theme in this deck. Flurry means something happens when we cast our second spell each turn. So when we do that, we will copy that spell and then exile the one we cast with 4 time counters on it, and if it doesn't have Suspend, it gains Suspend. What this means is, if we were to cast a Path to Exile, let's say, and it's our second spell this turn, we copy the Path to Exile, choose a target for the copy, obviously, and then exile the original, and so it's not going to resolve this turn. So what we're going to do is we cast the original path, targeting our opponent's commander, let's say. Tygum will make a copy of it. We use that copy to also target the opponent's commander, because our original is going to go to exile and not resolve, but the copy will. So Tygum is replacing the spell we cast with a copy so that we can suspend the original. And then suspend means, at the beginning of our upkeep, we remove a time counter from our spell, and when the last time counter is removed, we can play that spell without paying its mana cost, and it has haste if it's a creature. So Tygum lets us have extra creatures, doubling up our creatures that way, but what we're hoping for with this is to cast a spell, cast an instant or sorcery, it goes to our graveyard. Then, when Tygum's out, on a later turn, we cast a creature spell, a human, which gives the instant or sorcery in our graveyard flashback. We cast that instant or sorcery as our second spell. Tygum sends it to exile, and we make a copy of it. And so now, since it's in exile, we get to cast it again 4 turns from now, since it's going to have 4 time counters on it. Let me know in the comments if flashback prevents us from having it go to exile, but I think it does work. I think this lets us sort of cheat on our flashbacks. And even if it doesn't, we do have that second spell theme, so being able to get an extra copy of it is not bad, or copies of creatures as well. Next up is Augur of Autumn, also from Midnight Hunt originally. This is 1 and double green for a 2/3 human druid that says you may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may play lands from the top of your library. So that's card advantage for us. If we've got a land on top of our library, we can just play that rather than having to use one of the cards in our hand. And if we have Coven, which is to say, as long as we control 3 or more creatures with different powers, then we can also cast creature spells from the top of our library. So that's pretty sweet. Champion of Lambholt is next. I love this card. For 1 and double green, we get a 1/1 human warrior that says, creatures with power less than this creature's power can't block creatures you control. I want to say that again. Our opponent's creatures, if they have power less than Champion of Lambholt, can't block any of our creatures. So Champion of Lambholt, we want to make it really big so that it has power greater than all of our opponent's creatures, because if it does, none of our opponent's creatures can block any of our creatures. Luckily, whenever another creature we control enters, the champion puts a counter on itself. So we just keep playing our creatures, Champion Lambhold is going to get huge, and all of our board is going to be unblockable. It's pretty great. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a removal magnet, but that means that we are not getting our more valuable creatures removed. To be honest, Champion Lambhold, pretty valuable, but yeah, it's a pretty fun effect when it comes into play. Next up, we have Cosmo Grand Zenith from Edge of Eternities. 2 and a white for a 2/4 human soldier that says, we've got a Flurry thing. Whenever we cast our second spell, we can either make 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, or put a 1/1 counter on all of our creatures. So this is only going to happen once each turn, because we can only ever cast our second spell once each turn. It's not like every other spell. But getting a free 2 humans, that seems great. Or putting a counter on everything else, that seems great too. We can go wide or we can go tall, whatever we need in that moment. Now I want to make mention, this puts humans in play, but it is not casting a human spell, so it does not trigger our commander again. Next we have a non-creature spell. This is Crib Swap. Crib Swap is a kindred spell, which means it is an instant that has creature types. This has a creature type of Shapeshifter, but it also has the Changeling ability, which makes it every creature type. And it doesn't say this spell is every creature type, it's this card is every creature type. So Changeling works in all zones. That means if we cast Crib Swap, we are casting a human spell because it's kindred, it has Changeling, and so it's every creature type, so it's a human spell. That means this will trigger our commander. We can cast Crib Swap, give something in our graveyard flashback, and then flash that thing back. And we can use Crib Swap, we can flashback Crib Swap later on, and it will also trigger and let us target something else in our graveyard. So anyway, this is 2 and a white for a spell that exiles a creature, and its controller makes a 1/1 colorless Shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. So I kind of like that this is sort of our Stroke of Midnight for the deck. We can only hit creatures with it, but it does give them a 1/1 human, since that Shapeshifter has Changeling. Anyway, if you like the new printing for Lorwyn Eclipsed, Crib Swap is being reprinted in it. So yeah, I just really like the little smile on this guy. Next up is Devout Chaplain. This is 2 and a white for a 2/2 human cleric that says if we tap it and tap 2 untapped humans we control, we can exile an artifact or an enchantment. So this is us tapping 3 creatures down, but we can also do this on our opponent's turn, so we can leave them up to look like blockers until it's, the last possible second. So Devout Chaplain lets us turn our creatures into repeatable disenchant effects, and it's not even disenchant because it exiles rather than destroying, so pretty powerful. Formless Genesis is next. This is another kindred spell with Changeling, so while it's not a human, it is a human spell. However, this makes a token, so it's actually giving us a creature, even though it's not a creature typed spell. So what does it do? For 2 and a green, we make an XX colorless Shapeshifter creature token with Changeling and with Death Touch, where X is the number of land cards in our graveyard. Note, that means if we cast this and there are no lands in our graveyard, it will make a 0/0, which will die as soon as it enters the battlefield and state-based actions are checked. However, Formless Genesis has Retrace, which means we can cast it from our graveyard by discarding a land in addition to paying its other costs. So we can play this over and over and over as long as we have a land to discard without having to flash it back using our commander, which means we have the ability to turn our lands in our hand into the equivalent of human spells, since we can discard them and cast Formless Genesis using Retrace for 2 and a green over and over. It is, of course, a human spell, so we get to keep re-triggering Katilda and Lier, and since we're putting lands in the graveyard, it is making our Shapeshifter that we make bigger each time, since its power and toughness are based on the number of lands in our graveyard. Plus, it's a human, and it has Death Touch. It seems good. Heronblade Elite is next. 2 and a green for a 1/1 human warrior with Vigilance that says whenever another human we control enters, we put a 1/1 counter on the Heronblade Elite, and we can tap the Heronblade Elite for an amount of mana of any one color equal to its power. So on its own, it's a 1/1 vigilance that taps for 1, but anytime we get any other humans to enter, it's going to just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. If you're wondering when another human enters, remember these changeling cards, like Formless Genesis, it's going to make a shapeshifter creature token with changeling. Changeling functions in all zones, so it will be a human when it enters, so it will trigger the Heronblade Elite. Next up is Kellen the Kid. This is the final version of Kellen from his arc that went from Wilds of Eldraine into Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Even though I do think we get another Kellen later that year in Foundations, but this is his sort of ultimate form. So Kellen is a 3/3 legendary human fairy rogue for a green, a white, and a blue, so same as our commander. Kellen is a 3/3 flyer with lifelink, pretty good. And whenever we cast a spell from anywhere other than our hand, that includes our graveyard when we flash our spells back, we can also cast a permanent spell with equal or lesser mana value from our hand without paying its mana cost. And if we don't, we may put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. So this lets us get a free spell as long as it's already in our hand and it has no more mana value than the spell we're casting from somewhere other than our hand. Or it lets us ramp by taking a land and putting it into play without having to use a land drop for the turn to do so. In any case, though, Kellen's a 3/3 for 3 that has flying and lifelink, and as a human, it seems good. Next up is Lauren of the Third Path. I put this in basically all of my white decks because it's just a great Reclamation Sage. 2 and a white for a 2/1 legendary human artificer with vigilance, that when Lauren enters, we get to destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So she comes with a disenchant. Pretty good. We can also, once she no longer has summoning sickness, tap her, and we and another opponent, or an opponent rather, each draw a card. So this is repeatable card draw for us, and it lets us be a little political. It lets us say to our opponent, hey look, I'll let you draw a card if you'll leave me alone for the next turn, or if you have a board wipe planned, you wait for a turn, something like that. People are likely to do that. They'll say, sure, I've got other people to attack, and I'll happily take a free card. So yeah. Next we have Mirror Entity. This is 2 and a white for a 1/1 shapeshifter with changeling, so this is also a human spell, and is a human of course, that has 1 ability other than changeling. We can just pay X generic mana, and until end of turn, creatures I control, the player of this deck controls, have base power and toughness XX and gain all creature types. So all of our creatures are humans, as well as everything else, and have a base power and toughness of XX, which means we don't want to activate this for just 0 mana, because it will make all of our creatures a 0/0, and they will all die. It does include the Mirror Entity as well in this all creatures. So yeah, this is a great way for us to say our board is plenty wide, we've got like 8 lands, let's tap them all, turn everything into an 8/8 until end of turn. That sounds good to me. Next we have Realm Walker. 2 and a green for a 2/3 shapeshifter with changeling, so again, it's a human. And it says, as this creature enters, we choose a creature type. We will choose human. We may look at the top card of our library at any time, and we can cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top of our library. So again, another way, sort of like the Augur of Autumn, for us to look at the top card of our library and be able to cast spells from the top of it. But we don't have to have Coven to be able to cast creature spells. It just has to be that those creature spells are human creature spells. Now that's notable. We can cast creature spells from the top of our library. Even though Crib Swap is a human spell, because that's how Kindred works, it is not a creature spell. It just has a creature type to it. I know Kindred's a little strange, but Realm Walker lets us cast spells that say creature on their type line. Even if we had like Formless Genesis, it makes a creature token, and it has a creature type, all of them in fact, because it has changeling, but it is not a creature spell. So Realm Walker doesn't let us cast it. But we've got lots of other creatures that we can cast, including our commander. Just kidding. Hopefully our commander's not in our library. Torrens, Fist of the Angels, is next. 1, a green and a white for a 2/2 legendary human cleric with training. Training is a weird mechanic. It says whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, we put a 1/1 counter on Torrens. So if Torrens attacks with our Cathar Commando, which is a 3/1. Training will trigger when they both attack, because Taurens will be attacking with something that has greater power than 2, and Taurens will get a counter and be a 3/3. This all happens, of course, before blockers get to be declared. In addition, whenever we cast a creature spell, any creature spell, we make a 1/1 green and white human soldier creature token with training. So a little bit annoying to find this token if you're the kind of person that likes to have the specific printed token, but Taurens was printed in, was it Midnight Hunt? It was Crimson Vow. Taurens was printed in Crimson Vow and in Innistrad Remastered, so there's been multiple chances for those tokens to get floating around, so you are probably able to find it. If not, tells you right here what the token does. No big deal. Just write it on an Infinite token. Inga and Asika is next. Love this card. Check out my Inga and Asika video for in this March of the Machine playlist to see how I built them as a commander deck. But I'm a big fan of Asika, just as a character. I love this Wayne Reynolds art. Just, yeah, we talk about this card a lot. Love it. For 2, a green and a blue, we get a 4/4 legendary human god. A human and a god that gives all of our creatures vigilance and tap to add 1 mana of any color, but you can only spend this mana to cast creature spells. So restrictive mana, but the ability to use them to tap for that mana, and we have a lot of creatures in the deck, that's pretty good. In addition, whenever we cast a creature spell, if we spent 3 mana or more from creatures to cast that spell, we draw a card. So essentially, if we've tapped 3 of our creatures from 1 mana each, and we put all 3 of those mana toward casting a creature spell, we get a free card draw from it. Thanks, Inga and Asika. It's also pretty nice that all of our creatures have vigilance. Yeah. Next up is Audric, Master Tactician. 2 and double white for a 3/4 legendary human soldier with first strike that says whenever Audric and at least 3 other creatures attack, you choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. What that means is if Audric and 3 other creatures are, if we attack with Audric and 3 other creatures, we can say, oh yeah, opponent, you're not blocking this turn. We can choose to have them not block. None of their creatures get to block. We're the ones that get to pick. But the reason Audric doesn't just say our creatures are unblockable is because we might want them to block so we can use our creatures to kill their creatures. Maybe we're willing to make some trades, or maybe we're willing to use something like First Strike to kill their creatures, even though they might have killed us otherwise. Our opponent is probably not going to want to block in a way that loses them a bunch of creatures, but Audric says we get to make that choice for them. So we get to either kill their creatures, slip past them with our own creatures, or do both. We get to choose the whole thing. Pretty gross. Again, another nice piece of removal bait. OG the Exquisite Blade is from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. This is a 2/3 legendary human monk for 2, a white and a blue. When OG enters, we gain 2 life and we scry 2, so that's pretty good. The scry is very nice with our couple of effects that let us play off the top of our library especially. And whenever we cast our second spell each turn, we get to exile up to 1 target creature we control and then return to the battlefield under its owner's control. This is flickering or blinking. So every time we cast our second spell each turn, we get to flicker something. Now it's not a may, we have to do, well it says up to 1, so I guess it kind of is a may. But the worst case scenario is we do this with OG. Just get a little bit of extra value when OG re-enters. But the nice thing is being able to have creatures that when they enter, they put counters on things, or if we have our Champion of Lambhold in play, it doesn't matter, we don't flicker the champion, we flicker something else, maybe just OG, and then that something else returns to the battlefield and triggers the champion. So OG is a great way for us to get rebuying our ETB effects, our enters effects rather, just because we're casting multiple spells each turn. I really like OG. Next up is Savvy Trader, 3 and a green for a 3/3 human citizen that says when it enters, we take a permanent card from our graveyard and exile it, and we can play that card for as long as it remains exiled. So it's sort of like it's recurred that card for us, it's drawn it essentially. It's in exile, we can play it. It's a permanent, so we can get our lands back if we want to, and play them as our land drop on either this turn if we have our land drop still, or a later turn, or we can get back our creatures or other permanents. Just being able to replay them is pretty good. In addition, spells we cast from anywhere other than our hand cost 1 generic mana less to cast. That works in this deck for all of the spells we're flashing back, assuming they have generic mana in their cost. but it also works on the spell we're casting from exile. So yeah, Savvy Trader is very nice for us. Next from the Spider-Man set is Silk, Web Weaver. I have a commander deck for Silk as well, so check that out on my channel. I think it's called Up, Up, and Away Web. For 2, a green, and a white, we have a 3/5 legendary Spider-Human hero with web slinging for 1, a green, and a white. What that means is this is an alternate casting cost. We can cast Silk for 3 mana if we also return a tapped creature we control to our hand. So this is a way for us to rebuy the creature that's tapped. We cast it, we get whatever effect it has. We cast Silk with web slinging because that creature we have, we've contrived a way to tap it. Maybe we attacked with it. And then we cast Silk while it's still tapped for 1 mana less than we otherwise would, and we get to put that creature back in our hand to cast it again. Pretty sweet. And when we cast it again, as well as whenever we cast any creature spell, we make a 1/1 green and white human citizen creature token. It's a citizen, but it's also a human, so it helps us with our humans entering, and just creatures entering in general. Finally, Silk lets us give all of our creatures +2/+2 in Vigilance until end of turn for 3, a green, and a white. So it's even better value than what Raph is giving us. Pretty sweet. Next is Sunstar Lightsmith. This is another one of our Flurry cards. 3 and a white for a 3/3 human artificer that says whenever we cast our second spell each turn, we put a 1/1 counter on this creature and we draw a card. So cast our second spell, replaces itself. Pretty great. Venser Shaper Savant, an old classic. 2 and double blue for a 2/2 legendary human wizard with flash. So another spell that lets us cast our instants with flashback on our opponent's turn by flashing Venser in, triggering Katilda and Lier, targeting the instant in our graveyard, and then we can play it the rest of that turn with its flashback cost. Venser says when it enters, we can return a target spell or permanent to its owner's hand. So this does let us return our own permanents to our hand, so we can cast them again. It also lets us return our spells to our hand. But more importantly, we can return our opponent's spells and permanents. So this is a bit of a removal spell, or it's not really a counter spell, but it's like a reband. It's pretty good. Wizards of Thay is next, also from Baldur's Gate. 3 and a blue for a 3/3 human wizard with Myriad. Myriad means when this attacks, if we're attacking opponent A and we have 2 other opponents, we will make a copy that's attacking opponent B or one of their planeswalkers, and another copy that's attacking opponent C or one of their planeswalkers. And then at the end of combat, we exile those tokens. Every time we attack with Wizards of Thay, it's attacking all of our opponents in the form of making tokens that are each attacking a different person, or one of their planeswalkers. It's a possibility. Wizards of Thay lets us cast our instants and sorceries as though they have 1 less mana cost, because they do. They cost 1 less to cast. So that's multiplied when we have these Myriad creatures out. Again, not relevant if we're not casting an instant, because these Myriad tokens only last during combat, but that's pretty nice. In any case, being able to cast all of our 25 instants and sorceries for 1 generic mana less is great on its own. And, oh wait, we can cast our sorceries using the Myriad tokens discount, because all of our sorceries can be cast as though they had flash. This is, I think, one of 2 ways we have in the deck to be able to do this, and it is awesome. Being able to flashback things on our opponent's turn, but by playing like, say, Venser, we flashback a big sorcery, and we cast that sorcery on an opponent's turn, pretty sweet. Next up is Chulane, originally from the Brawl decks from Throne of Eldraine, my favorite set. Chulane, Teller of Tales, is 2, a green, a white, and a blue for a 2/4 legendary human druid with Vigilance that says whenever we cast a creature spell, we draw a card, and we may put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. This is Growth Spiral. This is a free 2 mana spell every time we cast a creature spell. Even if we want to think of it as when you cast a creature spell, draw a card, and then maybe get something else, that's replacing, every creature replaces itself. This is very strong. In addition, we can pay 3 and tap Chulane to bounce one of our creatures. So we can buy those creatures for 3 and tap every time we want to. Pretty great. Also, I should mention, this is at instant speed. So we can use this to maybe an opponent's attacking with a really big creature that doesn't have trample. We block with one of our creatures, and then before damage, bounce that creature with Chulane, the big non-trampling attacker is still blocked. And likewise, we can save our creatures. We can bounce Katilda and Lier to our hand if it's targeted with a removal spell. Or even when there's a board wipe, we can do that so that we don't have to pay the commander tax again. Pretty good. Next is Kyler, Sigardan Emissary. 3, a green and a white for a 2/2 legendary human cleric with whenever another human we control enters, put a 1/1 counter on Kyler, and other humans you control get +1/+1 for each counter on Kyler. So Kyler shares their counters, in a sense, with everyone else. Kyler is an anthem effect, and that anthem is based on the number of counters on it. Now, it doesn't actually put other counters on other creatures, that is, but you basically treat all of the 1/1 counters on Kyler as affecting every human you control, including Kyler. Pretty sweet. Next is Maha Bredegard Protector from Kaldheim. 2, a green and double white for a 2/3 legendary human warrior that gives all of our other creatures +1/+1, so another anthem. And has a landfall ability. Whenever a land we control enters, we make a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. So that's another human coming in, which means it's going to trigger any of our things that care about humans, but also it's taking advantage of this anthem effect on Maha, so we're really getting a 2/2. Pretty good. Spider-Man India is also in here. I mentioned before I have a deck for Silk. That deck is a Silk and Spider-Man India deck. So check that out. I'll try and link it in the video's description. For 3, a green and a white, we have a 4/4 legendary Spider-Human hero that also has web slinging. So costs 1 more than Silk, but web slings for the same cost. And whenever we cast a creature spell, we put a 1/1 counter on a creature we control, and it gains flying until end of turn. So we're pumping up one of our creatures every time we cast a creature spell, and we're giving it a way to be evasive. So very powerful for Spider-Man India. Thanks, buddy. Finally, in this section is Archetype of Imagination. 4 and double blue for a 2/3 enchantment creature, human wizard, that gives all of our creatures flying, and creatures our opponents control lose flying and can't have or gain flying. So Archetype of Imagination means the skies are full of our creatures and no one else's. This is sweet. Being able to say nobody gets flying but us, and all of our creatures get it, is kind of like saying all of our creatures are unblockable, unless one of our opponents has something with reach, because this doesn't do anything to reach. So if an opponent doesn't have any reachers, we can swing and just kill them, or damage them deeply, or say, hey, would you like me to kill you, or would you like me to kill someone else? What will you give me to not kill you? Yeah, Archetype of Imagination is very powerful in this. Again, a nice piece of removal bait that we don't need to win with, but it's really sweet too. When we have a huge board, our opponents are thinking about how they're going to block, we pay 6 mana and they realize they can't block, and it's over. So that is our humans section. So this is our Typal section. These are cards that care about our humans and are supplemented by them. We've seen a lot of these already. Coppercoat Vanguard, of course, gives our other humans +1/+0 and Ward 1. Katilda gives all of our humans the ability to tap for mana. Devout Chaplain lets us tap 2 untapped humans with itself to exile, disenchant something. We also have For the Ancestors, 2 and a green for an instant that says we choose a creature type. Of course, we'll choose humans. And we look at the top 6 cards of our library. We can reveal any number of cards of the chosen type, and then put the revealed cards in our hand and put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So we look at the top 6 and we draw any of the ones that we looked at that are humans. Pretty sweet. Remember, Changeling cards count as human cards because they have a creature type, even though they are not a creature spell. So we get to do that. In addition, this has flashback for 3 and a green, which is nice for us. It means we can flash it back for 3 and a green when Katilda and Lier is not on the battlefield, or we haven't chosen For the Ancestors with it. Or we can flash it back for its mana cost if we use Katilda and Lier to do so. So it gives it a second flashback cost, and really ability, that we can activate for cheaper than the one printed on it if we use it with Katilda and Lier. Pretty sweet. Heronblade Elite, of course, gives us gets a counter every time one of our humans comes into play. Next we have Mass Appeal. 2 and a blue for a sorcery that says draw a card for each human you control. Pretty good. It's divination mana, and it's like a huge amount of card draw, probably. Even if early on it is just a divination, that's totally fine. Realm Walker, as we've seen, lets us cast human-typed creatures from the top of our library, assuming we choose human as it enters, and we will. Sigarda, I believe, is the only non-creature or non-human creature in our deck. Sigarda, Font of Blessings, is 2, a green, and a white for a 4/4 flying legendary angel that gives all other permanents we control hexproof. That's our lands, that's our creatures, everything but Sigarda herself. And she says we can look at the top card of our library at any time, and we can cast angel spells, of which we don't have any in the main deck, but maybe you're going to put more angels in here. There are definitely angels that care about humans, but also human spells from the top of our library. So this is another way, much like Realm Walker, for us to cast humans off the top of our library. Pretty good. So that is our Typal section, and that covers most of the things in our game plan, except for all the spells that we want to cast. Most of which, however, like I mentioned, fit into our support categories. So we're going to go through those support categories now and see the spells we can cast. We're going to start with our card advantage spells, which as usual I have tagged as draw. It doesn't necessarily mean all of these do the draw a card action. It's just letting us get access to more cards we can cast. So Bushwhack is the first. For a single green, we have a sorcery that lets us either Lay of the Land, search our library for a basic, put it into our hand after revealing it, and shuffle, or one of our creatures fights a creature we don't control. So it's a draw a land spell or a removal spell. You find a bush or you whack someone. Chart a Course is next. For 1 and a blue, we have a sorcery that draws us 2 cards, but requires us to discard a card unless we attacked this turn. So we want to play this post-combat after we attack with something, and we're getting to draw 2 cards for 2 mana rather than 3, which is what divination would be. We talked about Growth Spiral a little bit ago. Here it is. A green and a blue for an instant that lets us draw a card and gives us permission to put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. We don't have to do it tapped. It's just part of resolution of this spell. So this is a little bit of ramp and a little bit of draw for us. Planar Genesis from Modern Horizons 3 is next. A green and a blue for an instant that says, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. If you don't, put a card from among them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is pretty sweet because it lets us dig 4 deep. It lets us look at what those are, and if we want to use this as ramp, we can do so by putting a land from among those on the battlefield tapped. If we don't want to, we can just put a card in our hand. It can be a land card if we feel like doing it that way, because maybe we see a basic land and we haven't made our land drop this turn yet. So we could just put a card in our hand, it's a land, play it as our land drop, and we're good, and it's on the battlefield untapped. Or maybe we want a spell, we can get that too. Planar Genesis is very powerful for us. Quandrix Apprentice, we've seen the Quandrix Apprentice, lets us look at the top 3 and get a land into our hand every time we cast or copy an instant or sorcery. Wrath lets us tap 2 untapped creatures we control when we cast an instant or sorcery to draw a card. See the Truth, so good. 1 and a blue for a sorcery that says look at the top 3, put 1 in your hand, and put the rest on the bottom in any order. But if this spell was cast from anywhere other than your hand, put each of those cards in your hand instead. So this means we cast this the first time, look at 3, put 1 in our hand, put the 2 on the bottom. Then we flash this back with Katilda and Lier. We look at the top 3, and we put all of them in our hand. It becomes a 2-mana draw 3. Very good. Augur of Autumn lets us have access to the top of our library to play lands, and if we have Coven, to cast creature spells. That's getting access to more cards than just what's in our hand, so that's card advantage. Broker's Charm from Streets of New Capenna is Bant mana for an instant that says, choose 1. Target creature you control gains +1/+0 until end of turn, and it deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls, so it's removal. We can destroy an enchantment, it's removal, or we can draw 2. So it's a weirdly costed divination at instant speed. Pretty good. Weirdly costed quick study, I guess. For the Ancestors, we just saw we get to look at the top 6 and get any number of humans we want of those 6 into our hand, and we can flash it back. Lauren, we can tap to have us and an opponent draw a card. Mass Appeal lets us draw a card for every human we control. Pretty good. Realm Walker, same thing as Augur of Autumn for our human spells at the top. Solve the equation is 2 and a blue for a sorcery that lets us search our library for an instant or sorcery, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. So this finds us whatever we may need. Pretty good. Being able to flash it back a second time? Yeah, bonus. Distant Melody is next. 3 and a blue for a sorcery. Choose a creature type, draw a card for each permanent you control of that type. So that means it's Mass Appeal. It costs 1 more, but it's Mass Appeal. Pretty good. Inga and Asika is next. We've seen that. It lets us draw cards whenever we cast a creature spell using 3 or more mana from creatures that we tap for that mana. Sigarda, much like the Realm Walker, lets us cast human and angel spells from the top of our library, which I guess is relevant because that means we can cast Crib Swap from the top of our library if we want. Because it does not say creature spells, it says angel spells and human spells, of which our 2 non-creature kindred spells with Changeling qualify. So yeah, we could Crib Swap off the top of the library with Sigarda. Pretty sweet. Sunstar Lightsmith lets us draw a card when we cast our second spell each turn, in addition to putting a counter on itself. Chulane lets us draw a card and put a land into play every time we cast a creature spell. And finally, we have a Planeswalker. It's Vivien Reid, who is herself a human, but not human typed. So 3 and double green for a 5 loyalty Vivien Planeswalker. +1, we can look at the top 4 cards of our library and we can reveal a creature or land from among them and put it into our hand. Put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So we can't get Crib Swap, for example, off the top of the library with this, but we do have 32 creatures in our deck, other than our commander, that we might be able to find, and 38 lands in our deck. That's 70 cards in our deck. Vivien can probably get us into our hand. +1 is basically a draw spell. -3, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Very nice. And if we can get Vivien up to 8 loyalty, which, if we can, our opponents are basically conceding, because we get an emblem at -8 with creatures you control get +2/+2 and have vigilance, trample, and indestructible. Our creatures are eternal, they are evasive, they don't have to tap, and they are very big. If your opponents let you do, don't let your opponents with Vivien Reid ultimate her. So that is our card advantage section. Let's look now at acceleration, which again we've just shorthand tagged as ramp. Avacyn's Pilgrim, we've seen, is like our Llanowar Elves, but it taps for green. Of course we're running Soul Ring. It costs 1, comes in untapped, and it's an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. It pays for itself immediately. Very good, gotta run Soul Ring. Same is true of Arcane Signet. For 2 generic mana, we've got to run this because it's an artifact that comes in untapped and taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. That means it taps for white, blue, or green in this deck. So this is a 2 mana rock, a mana producing artifact that fixes all of our colors and comes in untapped. Yeah, we're taking that. But notice, those are the only 2 artifacts in our deck, Arcane Signet and Soul Ring. The reason is because we want to do any ramping we can in the form of human creatures or in the form of spells that we can flash back. So that's why I only kept these 2, because they're both just very good for their mana cost. Otherwise, we have things like Farseek. This is a rampant growth. It's a 1 and a green sorcery that lets us search for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. We obviously don't have any swamps or mountains in this deck, but this doesn't violate the commander color identity rules, because there's no colored pips here. It does let us find a plains or an island, which is to say, we can get a basic plains, we can get a basic island, or we can get a typed duel, one of our cards, our land cards that has multiple basic types, and as long as one of those types is plains or island, we can fetch that and then put it on the battlefield tapped. We'll talk more about this during the land-based section of this video. We've seen Growth Spiral, lets us put a land from our hand onto the battlefield after drawing a card. Katilda lets our creatures, our humans, tap for 1 mana of any color that it has, that it's one of its colors. Nature's Lore is sort of the mirror to Farseek. Nature's Lore is 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search for a forest, the only type that Farseek doesn't let us look for. Then we get to put it on the battlefield and shuffle. So why is Nature's Lore nearly $3 and Farseek is 50 cents? Because Nature's Lore does not put the forest onto the play tapped. So we can find a basic forest put it into play untapped, and it's like we've gotten a rebate on Nature's Lore. Or if we find a dual-typed land, or a multi-typed land that is a forest that we can get into play without being tapped somehow, like one of the Tango lands you'll see in our land base, this is a great thing to find with it. Yeah, Nature's Lore, great in here as another rampant growth for us. Planar Genesis, of course, lets us look at the top 4, and if there's a land among them, we can put it on the battlefield tapped if we want, or we can draw a card. We're also running regular old rampant growth. 1 and a green, sorcery, search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. Nothing wrong with rampant growth, and we've got plenty of basics to find with it. Heronblade Elite lets us tap it for mana of any one color equal to its power. Kellen, when we cast a spell from somewhere other than our hand, we can put a permanent, we can cast a permanent from our hand, or we can put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. That's ramp. Inganasika lets all of our creatures tap for mana that we can only use to cast creature spells, but we got a lot of those. And of course, Chulane lets us growth spiral every time we cast a creature spell. So great. That is our acceleration section. Let's talk now about interaction, which again I've just shorthanded as removal. So Bushwhack, we can choose to have one of our creatures fight another creature. That can be good removal. Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares have one difference but are otherwise the same card. A great card. They both cost a single white mana, they both are instants, and they both exile a target creature, and they both give that creature's controller a little kickback. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power, and Path to Exile lets that creature's controller rampant growth. Search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So this is very strong. Swords to Plowshares, a little stronger, but both very good in this deck. Cathar Commando lets us pay 1 and sack it to destroy an artifact or an enchantment. Run Away Together is 1 and a blue for an instant that lets us choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players and bounce them, put them back in their owner's hands. So while we can bounce opponent A's creature and opponent B's creature, it's got to be 2 creatures controlled by different players. We can bounce 2 creatures that we don't control. We can also use this to bounce one of our creatures and as well as an opponent's creature, which is another way for us to rebuy an effect if we want to do that. A little flexibility with Run Away Together. And of course, this is the Foundation's printing, but it's the Throne of Eldraine art and flavor text. Gotta love Throne. We've seen Broker's Charm. One of its options is a bite effect, giving one of our creatures +1/+0 and having it deal its power and damage to a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls, or we can destroy an enchantment with it. Crib Swap, of course, exiles any creature that we want to. Devout Chaplain lets us repeatedly exile artifacts and enchantments. Lauren of the Third Path lets us destroy an artifact or an enchantment when she enters, so maybe something we want to rebuy with Run Away Together. Venser lets us bounce a spell on the stack or a permanent, which could be one of ours, but likely to be one of our opponents. And Vivian, we can -3 to destroy an artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. So those are our interaction spells. We are running 1 Wrath in the deck, and it's Austere Command. This is the one I thought was going to be the most fun for this. For 4 and double white, we have a sorcery that says choose 2. Destroy all artifacts, enchantments, creatures with mana value 3 or less, or creatures with mana value 4 or greater. A lot of the time, we're going to be saying all artifacts and enchantments, because we're only running 2 enchantments and 2 artifacts. So the likelihood of it hitting us versus everyone else, very low. But if that's the case, we could be running Cleansing Nova, which is 5 mana in white to either destroy all artifacts and enchantments or all creatures. But what we'd like to be able to do is look at our board and say, well, we've got an awful lot of creatures that are mana value 3 or less, and maybe only 1 that's mana value higher than that. So we're going to destroy all artifacts and all creatures with mana value 4 or greater and kill off all the big things our opponents have. Austere Command gives us enough flexibility that we can do whatever we need. That is our section of Wraths, only 1 Wrath. So let's talk about the things that supplement our game plan. We have a bunch of different ways that we do that, starting with our pump spells. These are spells that make our creatures or other creatures bigger because we still win through combat with our spells helping out. So Coppercoat Vanguard gives all of our humans an extra point of power. Katilda, we can pay 4 a green and a white and tap her to put a counter on all of our creatures. Wrath, we can pay 3 and double white without tapping and give all of our creatures +1/+1 and vigilance until end of turn. Broker's Ascendancy is one of our 2 enchantments. It's a green, a white, and a blue for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control and a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. so this helps Vivian read as well. But a counter for free at the end step on all of our creatures, pretty good for just 3 mana. Champion of Lambholt pumps itself up, so it's not exactly a pump spell, but it's worth noting in the pump category because its power is what's keeping our creatures unblockable. So something worth thinking about there. Cosmic Grand Zenith lets us put a 1/1 counter on all of our creatures when we cast our second spell each turn, if we wish. Mirror Entity, we can just pay into it and make everything that we have, base power and toughness, equal to the amount we paid into it. Unbreakable Formation is next. 2 and a white for an instant that says creatures we control gain indestructible until end of turn. So that's a good protective ability. But it has Addendum, which means it gets an extra effect if we cast it during our main phase. We can still do that at instant speed, but if we do it during our main phase, we also put a 1/1 counter on all of our creatures, and they also gain Vigilance until end of turn. So +1/+1, Vigilance, and Indestructible, pretty great. We've seen Silk. Silk can pump up our creatures for 3 a green and a white by +2/+2, and also give them Vigilance. Kyler shares the counters that it gets on it whenever our humans enter in the form of a big Anthem effect. Maha has a regular Anthem effect, giving all other creatures +1/+1. Overwhelming Stampede is one of our big finishers. 3 and double green for a sorcery that says until end of turn, creatures we control gain Trample and a power bonus equal to the greatest power among creatures we control. So if the biggest creature we have is a 3/3, all of our creatures, including that one, get +3/+3 and Trample, which is Overrun. That's still good, but it might be quite a lot more based on all these other pump effects. Spider-Man India lets us put a single 1/1 counter on one of our creatures when we cast a creature spell, and that creature gains flying until end of turn. And Vivian, of course, has her absurd emblem that if we can get to that, yeah, we want to. That is our pump section. We talked a little bit about rebuying our spells, so here's our rebuy section. Ways for us to get the to re-trigger ETB effects and also to trigger our commander when one of our creatures comes in. Starting with a Lorman Eclipsed card, since Lorman Eclipsed is technically the release is, this Thursday. For 1 and a white, we get an instant that says exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control and create a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. So I did not put this in the humans section, but I could have because this does give us a creature, and that's pretty good. Even though it's just a 1/1 essentially for us human, and that's all that matters. Notably, this is not a kindred instant, so it does not itself have Changeling, so we can't cast this and thereby trigger everything, including our commander that cares about us casting humans. But this is a flicker effect, so it lets us protect our creature, it lets us rebuy that enters trigger, and re-trigger our commander, of course, and so forth. Runaway Together, we've already talked about. We can rebuy by targeting one of our creatures with it. OG lets us flicker one of our creatures whenever we cast our second spell each turn. Savvy Trader lets us take one of our permanent cards, put it from the graveyard into exile, and then we can play it, thereby casting it, and we can cast it for less if we want to. Silk lets us web sling, as does Spider-Man India, which can let us rebuy whatever we've web slung back into our hand. Venser lets us bounce our things, same way, and Shoelane also does, by letting us pay 3 and tap to bounce one of our creatures to our hand. So we can do a lot of different ways of rebuying in this deck. But what are we not rebuying? Well, probably the tokens that we're making. We've got a bunch of ways to make tokens as well. Personify, of course, gives us a shapeshifter token with Changeling. Cosmic Grand Zenith, when we cast our second spell, we can get 2 1/1 humans. Formless Genesis makes a token every time we cast it, and we can keep casting it by retracing it. Torrens lets us get these 1/1 human soldiers with training every time we cast a creature spell. Silk gives us 1/1 green and white human citizens whenever we cast a creature spell. Increasing Devotion, we haven't seen yet. Oh, I'll just mention Maha, of course, has Landfall, make a 1/1 human warrior, so we get those as well. Increasing Devotion is a sorcery for 3 and double white that says create 5 1/1 white human creature tokens. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, create 10 of those tokens instead. And it has flashback for 7 and double white. So this is great because we can pay 5 to get 5, and then pay 9 to get 10 more. But with Katilda and Lier, if we've cast Increasing Devotion or otherwise gotten into the graveyard, we can cast a human spell and target increasing devotion with Katilda and Lier, and now we can flash it back for just 3 and double white. So we're getting 5 mana for 5, and then 5 mana again for 10 more. And that gives us so many things that we can pump up with our Anthem effects. Visions of Glory is doing a similar thing in our deck. For 4 and a white, we get a sorcery that makes a 1/1 white human creature token for each creature we control. So we want to do this, hopefully, after we've played out a whole bunch of things, including played increasing devotion. It just doubles the number of creatures we have in play, and all the ones we make are humans. Visions of Glory also has flashback for 8 and double white. But this cost is reduced by the mana value of a commander we own on the battlefield or in the command zone. So our commander is mana value 3, so this is going to cost us 5 and double white, which is 7 mana, which is, kind of similar over here to increasing devotion. But anyway, we're not going to flash it back for this cost. We're going to flash it back for 4 and a white, thanks to Katilda and Lier. And just, if we have 10 mana, plus the cost of any human, let's say it's Avacyn's Pilgrim. So if we've got, 2 white and a green, plus another 8 mana, let's just go with me, pretend. We cast Visions of Glory. We double all the creatures that we have in play. We cast Avacyn's Pilgrim, targeting Visions of Glory with Katilda and Lier's trigger. We flash back Visions of Glory and double our creatures again. So we've essentially quadrupled our creatures in the same turn. Probably easier to do that over the course of a couple of turns, but yeah, that seems like a big board. Seems like something I would like to be able to pump up with things like Maha or Silk or even Cosmic Grand Zenith with these counters. Very nice. So that is our tokens section. Let's talk about all the cards that care about us casting 2 spells in a turn. That's our Flurry section. We've seen them all. Tygum lets us suspend one of our spells when we Flurry. Cosmic Grand Zenith lets us make tokens or put counters on our creatures. OG lets us flicker something. And Sunstar Lightsmith puts a counter on itself, but also lets us draw a card. All very nice. Next, we have a section of discounts. I separated these out from regular ramp spells because in the past I've had discount effects and I've just called them ramp, even though they do accelerate us in some ways. They're a little bit more specific. So Savvy Trader gives us a discount on all the spells we cast from somewhere other than our hand, and Wizards of Thay gives us a discount on any instants and sorceries we recast, including from somewhere other than our hand. So a little bit more powerful, a little bit more flexible, essentially gives us a card back, can give us even more of a discount with Myriad, lets us cast our sorceries at instant speed. Yeah, pretty good. That is our discount section. We have an evasion section. These are ways that our creatures can get past our opponent's creatures. Obviously, Champion of Lampholt lets us make our creatures unblockable by certain other creatures, and hopefully by all of the other creatures that we see on our opponent's board. Audric lets us decide how creatures are going to block if we attack with him and 3 other creatures. So we can make our things unblockable, or we can just create some good trades that are advantageous for us, or just kill some of their creatures without trading. Overwhelming Stampede gives all of our creatures trample and a power and toughness bonus based on the highest power we have. Spider-Man India can put a 1/1 counter and give flying to one of our creatures when we cast a creature spell. Vivian Reed, as we've said, can give trample plus a whole bunch of other stuff with her emblem. And Archetype of Imagination makes all of our other opponents' stuff lose flying. They can't have it in any way, while all of our stuff does have it. So if they don't have reachers, we are unblockable. So that is our evasion section. We also have a protection section. These are cards that protect us or protect our other permanents. So Coppercoat Vanguard, of course, gives all of our humans Ward 1. That's pretty nice. Lavinia makes it so our opponents can't cast non-creature spells with mana value greater than the number of lands they have, and they can't cast any spell for 0 mana unless they wanted to get countered. So this protects us by keeping them from doing some shenanigans. Personify lets us flicker one of our creatures, protecting it from whatever they may be, an opponent may be casting to remove it, other than a board wipe, of course. Unbreakable Formation makes all of our creatures indestructible, and that's at instant speed, so we can use that in response to whatever we need to. We won't get all of the benefits from Addendum that we would get if we were casting it during our main phase, but still a nice option for us. Sigarda makes all of our permanents, other than herself, hexproof. That seems good. And Vivian Reed, if we can get up to her emblem, all of our creatures are indestructible, and it's hard to be better protected than that. So that covers our protection section. We only have one card in our Recursion section, but it's a sweet one. Savine's Reclamation is 2 and a white for a sorcery that says return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And if the spell was cast from a graveyard, make a copy of Savine's Rec and choose a new target. And this flashes back for 4 and a white. So this is really good. We have, just for 3 mana, we can bring back something that costs 3 or less straight to the battlefield. That includes our commander. In fact, that includes lands if we really wanted to bring lands back from our graveyard, if they happen to have gotten there somehow. Maybe we cycled them, as you may see soon with our bicycle lands. But in any case, we can get Serene's Rec to bring something back for us, and then we can flash it back for 4 and a white, or we can target it with Katilda and Lier's ability to flash it back for 2 and a white. And it will still get this doubling effect since it's being cast from a graveyard, even if we're using it with a flashback cost from our commander rather than that's printed on the card. Pretty good. That covers our Recursion. Our last section is Synergy. These are cards that care about the graveyard or being cast from somewhere other than our hand. So See the Truth is 2 mana to look at the top 3 and put 1 in our hand, but if we cast it from somewhere other than our hand, like flashing it back, we look at the top 3 and put them all in our hand. Pretty great. Formless Genesis gives us a shapeshifter that gets bigger the more lands we get into our graveyard. Kellen the Kid gives us a trigger to either cast a spell from our hand or put a land from our hand onto the battlefield whenever we cast something from somewhere other than our hand, like flashing it back. Savine's Rec, as we just saw, gets better when we cast it from the graveyard, as does Increasing Devotion. And Savvy Trader lets us cast spells from somewhere other than our hand for 1 generic less whenever we do. Pretty great. And that covers all of our spells for the deck. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now. So we are mostly a white and green deck, so we're running 6 of each of those basics, plains and forests, and we have some islands as well. We could probably run fewer islands if we wanted to make our balance completely perfect, but I like to make sure that I err toward having more basics in all of my colors for a commander like Katilda and Lier, which is just 3 colors and needs just 3 pips and needs all 3 colors. So this is a pretty good balance for us. And obviously, since these are Innistrad Midnight Hunt type creatures, we have to use the Midnight Hunt lands, which includes the Pumpkin Plains. We're running all 3 bicycle lands in our colors. Irrigated Farmland is an example. It is a land that enters tapped, but has the basic types of Plains and Island, which not just means it can tap for white and blue inherently, but it also means we can fetch it with a spell like Farseek. Farseek can't find forests, but it can find plains, and it can find islands, so it can find the Irrigated Farmland. It could find this Scattered Groves as well, even though it can't find forests, because Scattered Groves is a plains. These lands are called bicycle lands because they can cycle for 2 as well, which means we can pay 2 and discard it from our hand to draw a card, something we might do later on in the game when we don't need lands as much and we really need card advantage. So this includes the Rain-Slicked Copse, which is the new bicycle land from the Lorwyn Eclipse Commander product. So anyway, all of these they work the same. The only difference is their basic types and therefore what colors they tap for. If we wanted to upgrade these, we could, I suppose, upgrade these to shock lands like Hallowed Fountain, because those are also basic typed, and they may not come in tapped. But we do lose the utility of cycling them, which, yeah, so there's the benefit. We're running all 3 check lands that are in our colors. Check lands, like Hinterland Harbor, are lands that don't have basic types, but they can tap for 2 colors, and they come in tapped unless we control a land that is the types that match the colors that taps for. So Hinterland Harbor will come in tapped if we don't control a forest or an island. But that doesn't mean just basic forests and islands. It could mean any of these bicycle lands, because Rain-Slicked Copse is a forest and an island, Irrigated Farmland is an island, and Scattered Groves is a forest. So with our 15 basics, 3 bicycle lands, and you'll see soon we have 3 tango lands, that means there's 21 cards in the deck that can turn on our check lands to make them come in as untapped duels. Pretty sweet for us. If you wanted to upgrade these, you could upgrade to slow lands like Deserted Beach rather than Glacial Fortress, which would give a little bit more consistency, but again, these are upgrades in the sense that they are maybe a little bit more effective, but they also cost a lot more. We're running 5 fixing lands. So Command Tower, obviously, is an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, which is to say this is an untapped tri-land. It taps for white, blue, and green. Excellent. We would like to have that as much as we can. It's essentially a land version of Arcane Signet, if you want to see it that way. So Command Tower, obviously we're including it in the deck. The same is true of Path of Ancestry, because it comes in tapped, but it has the same line of text that Command Tower does. 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. And when we use that mana on a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. So we are a Humans Typal deck. Of course we're going to be doing this all the time. It won't work for things like Crib Swap, because that's not a creature spell, even though it is a human spell. But anything that shares a creature type, which is to say human, with our commander, and is itself a creature spell, will get us a scry. Just in case you're wondering, that includes our commander themselves. So if we use Path of Ancestry's mana to cast Katilda and Lier, we will get that scry. So a tapped tri-land that gives us plenty of scries, pretty good. We're running Exotic Orchard, which is sort of a backwards version. This is a land that comes in untapped and makes 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So that's pretty cool. So if our opponents are only running, I don't know, red and black, then yes, this can only make red and black, so we can only use it for our generic mana costs, which is fine, honestly. It's an untapped land, and it makes mana for us. We would like it to be more colorful to help us, but it doesn't always have to be useful. However, this is Commander. Who's not going to have an opponent running green? So if this is just an untapped green source, that's not bad. And if it's an untapped source of 2 of our colors, we're already ahead of the curve. If we happen to have white, blue, and green among the lands that our opponents produce, Exotic Orchard is an untapped tri-land, and that's very powerful. That's a Command Tower for us. It's also possible that an opponent might themselves have an Exotic Orchard. And if they do, that means our Exotic Orchard sees their Exotic Orchard, which sees our other lands. So our orchard produces any color that our lands can produce. Pretty sweet. We're running Crows and Verge as a fetch. This is a land that comes in tapped and taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 tap and sack it to search our library for a forest and a plains, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. It does not say basic forest and basic plains, so we can find this Rain-Slicked Copse if we wanted to, because it's a forest, and we could find this Scatter Groves because it's a plains, which means we will have gotten all 3 of our colors over the course of 2 lands from the Crows and Verge. And we probably want to find the bicycle lands with that, because this puts them on the battlefield tapped, and the bicycle lands enter tapped anyway. So that helps us out with our fixing a lot. We can also find basics if we need to. Maybe we've already got our bicycles into play. No big deal. So even though Crows and Verge comes in tapped, requires us to pay for it to sack it, and brings these lands onto the battlefield tapped, this is 1 land drop that's turning into 2 lands, so it's ramping our land base, which is what we want. Which is why we're running Temple of the False God as well. I know not everyone likes this card, but this is an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana. That's a soul land, like a soul ring. We just can't activate it at all unless we have at least 4 other lands, so it needs 5 or more lands, including itself. So Temple of the False God, yes, if you have an opening hand that's an island and a Temple of the False God, you want to mulligan that. You're not going to be able to get out what you need to get out. But otherwise, mid-game, sometimes even early to mid-game, or especially late game, this is a land that makes more mana than the number of land drops it takes. So it's ramping us in a deck where we want a double spell. Plus, it's very inexpensive, and it's very powerful when it's either doing nothing or it's very strong, and it's more often strong than it is useless. So yeah, I like Temple of the False God, especially in our $75 commander deck. We're running 3 scry lands, like Temple of Enlightenment. These are lands that come in tapped, and tap for 1 or another color, and when they do, we scry 1. When they come in, that is. So these are great. These are a guaranteed scry, as opposed to the conditional but repeatable scry we would get from Path of Ancestry, and it fixes our mana. Temple of Enlightenment for white and blue, Temple of Mystery for green and blue, and Temple of Plenty for green and white. All of these are excellent. If you would like to upgrade, you could upgrade to the Surveil lands, like Lush Portico instead of Temple of Plenty. Those are not just good because they surveil instead of scrying, Surveil being great because it lets us put cards into our graveyard, which we might want to do as a way to flash them back. But also, the Surveil lands have the basic types, so we could fetch for them with something like Farseek, or Nature's Lore, or Crow's Verge. But they are much more expensive than these 15-cent, reprinted over and over, Scry lands. We are running, like with our bicycle lands, 3 Tango lands. Tango lands like Canopy Vista, which has the 2 basic types. So it's not basic, but it has these 2 types, so we can fetch for it. And it enters tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So for example, if we have Prairie Stream, which is a plains and an island, we can search for this with... let me use Canopy Vista as a better example. If we search for Canopy Vista with Nature's Lore, which finds a forest, and we already have 2 basics in play, Nature's Lore puts the fetch land into play untapped, and Canopy Vista comes in untapped if we have 2 or more basics. So if we Nature's Lore for Canopy Vista when we have 2 or more basics in play already, then we just got an untapped white source in addition to a green source, and that's pretty great. So that's why we've got all 3 of our Tango lands, including the Sodden Verdure, which is the Lorwyn Eclipsed new Tango land forest. I really like these. And very inexpensive in comparison to what you could upgrade them to, which again would be like a shock land. I think Sodden Verdure is probably going to drop in price, especially since Lorwyn Eclipsed doesn't even really release for another couple of days. So yeah, pretty good. We're running Seaside Citadel as our tri-land. It's a tap land that taps for all of our colors. That means it's not as good as Path of Ancestry, which is not as good as Command Tower, and it also means it's totally fine. We don't mind having a tap land that taps for all of our colors, because it taps for all of our colors. What do we want? We have also these 5 utility lands. Alchemist Refuge is a land that comes in untapped and taps for colorless, or we can pay a green and a blue and tap it, and we can cast spells as though they had flash until the end of turn. So this is not just great because we can cast spells on our opponent's turns, even though it costs us essentially 3 mana, a green, a blue, and tapping this land. But it means that when we cast those creature spells on our opponent's turn, we can then get Katilda and Lier triggers to flashback spells from our graveyard on that same turn. Maybe there are just instants in our graveyard that we can cast, that we want to cast on our opponent's turn. We want to flashback. Or maybe there are sorceries. It says we can cast spells at flash speed. Pretty great. We can, even if we want to, do some tricky stuff by activating Alchemist Refuge during combat on our turn. And maybe our opponent, rather early in our turn, we've already cast a creature spell and used Katilda and Lier to give something in our graveyard flashback, so we can surprise flash it back by being able to cast it with flash with Alchemist Refuge. Pretty strong. Demolition Field's in this deck, as in, I think, basically all of my decks, because most commander pods, for the level of decks that I build, don't want there to be land destruction. But sometimes you have to have an answer to someone with a non-basic land that is problematic, that is either accelerating their game plan too much, like a Rogue's Passage for someone who is playing a Voltron deck, or is stopping us from achieving our game plan, like if someone is playing like a Glacial Chasm and preventing damage on themselves. You want to have answers to that, but it's fair to have just one answer and to say, well, I didn't draw it this time, that's okay, but I wasn't going to use it most of the time anyway, so it's nice to have just a sort of a token answer for that. And Demolition Field is, for me, what I like to use. So this is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic that an opponent controls. That opponent then gets to search for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So neither they nor we are down a land, we just have basics in play, assuming, of course, we had basics left in our library, but the problematic non-basic is off the battlefield, and we're doing just fine. It's only a one-off card. I don't think it's asking too much, or doing too much, I should say. Gavany Township is next. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, a green and a white, and tap it to put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. This costs a little bit more than Katilda, or a little bit less than Katilda, because it's 5 total mana, 4 here and the township itself, versus the 6 and tapping her, so it's a little bit better. We could have upgraded this to Abandoned Air Temple from the Avatar: The Last Airbender set, but that's a little bit more expensive as a card, I believe. It's a little bit more effective in terms of its mana cost, because it only costs white to do. But, hey, this is Gavany. Gavany is an Innistrad. We want to use an Innistrad card. So yeah. Rogue's Passage, we just mentioned a moment ago. This is a great way to close out games if an opponent is really close to dying, but they have a lot of blockers. So an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it to make a creature unblockable until end of turn. So that can help us kill someone, but we can also use it politically. We can use it with an opponent and say, hey look, opponent A, I know you want to attack opponent B, but they've got too many blockers. I'll use my Rogue's Passage to make your creature unblockable, as long as you ignore me for a turn cycle or something. And they'll say something like, that sounds great, go ahead and do it. And we'll say, no, you have to attack first, because if you don't, and I make your creature unblockable, you could then declare them against me, and I couldn't block it. And they'll say, okay, that's fair. We're making a deal, so I'll trust you. I will declare this creature attacking opponent B. And we'll say, great, before blocks, activate my Rogue's Passage, make your creature unblockable, we have a deal. And they'll say, we're bros forever. And we'll think to ourselves, until end game. Finally, we have Urban Retreat. This is a card from the Spider-Man set. It's a tapped land that taps for all 3 of our colors, so it's already just as good as Seaside Citadel. But it also says, for 2 generic mana and the cost of returning a tapped creature we control to our hand, we can put this onto the battlefield, just only at sorcery speed. So we put it on the battlefield at sorcery speed and it comes in tapped. That's like a land drop, but this is not a land drop. This is us putting onto the battlefield in addition to making our land drop for turn, and we have to sort of web sling it in by paying 2 and bouncing one of our tapped creatures. So this lets us rebuy a creature, accelerate our mana by placing this into play without costing our land drop for turn, and it fixes all our mana. I mean, it just comes in tapped, but everything else is an upside for us. This is great. So yeah, very much like Urban Retreat in a deck like this. And that sums it up. Again, I'm making a deck for every legend from March of the Machine's main set, plus a few other spots. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or deck style, and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for watching, everyone. Remember to like and subscribe. Make sure to ring the bell if you want to be notified when I post my videos. And remember, Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.